Yeah, it's kind of crazy actually when I think I have lived a better part of half my life in Taiwan. Taiwan and Canada are pretty even with how I feel about the two places now, I would say. But it took me many years of moving back and forth to realize that Taiwan was a good fit for me. My life is in Taiwan now. I'll go home and visit, but this is where I live now. With my Chinese language skills is not, I can't have intimate, deep conversations with locals here, and that makes you feel displaced sometimes. Driving with your kids on your scooter is just a very common thing here that my parents will look at me and be like, is that safe? And probably not by Canadian standards, but it's just how we do things here. I feel a little bit displaced. Like, I know I'm Canadian, but almost like I feel like an alien in both places, if that makes any sense.
So why don't we just take it back to your origin story and like, where are you from originally? You're also a Canadian, I understand. Where did you grow up?
Grew up in Toronto, Ontario, North York to be exact. I guess a suburb of Toronto. And yeah, lived there from the time I was born, I guess till about, I want to say 20, 2021 was when I moved to Taiwan. So for the first 20, 21 years of my life, Toronto, Ontario.
And for those 20 years, did you have like an international kind of upbringing? Did you guys go on any trips to different countries?
Good question. Mostly, probably very common. Living in Toronto, where it's cold in the winter, we would go to Florida, Sarasota, Florida, in the winter break. I guess my grandparents had the I guess luxury or fortune of being able to afford a condominium in Sarasota, and we would stay at their condominium on I forget the name of the beach, Siesta Key, one of the most beautiful white sandy beaches that I've ever been to. So I would have the luxury of going there in the wintertime, I guess experiencing America, but beyond America, that was it. Mostly growing up.
Yeah, pretty typical Canadian experience, I guess. On the East Coast, you guys have Florida. Over here in the West, a lot of people go to Arizona. That's a popular spot, or even Mexico for that matter. You know, for a winter getaway to get some sun. You know, pretty typical growing up in Canada, going to the U.S. How did you end up moving to Taiwan? How did that take place?
So my sister, who is, I guess, maybe similar to yourself, fascinated with the world. She had always had the desire to be a world traveler. And she was traveling around with her boyfriend at the time. And they were trying to figure out where do they want to live. And they traveled, I think they went to Korea. And then they met a couple at a bar, a random bar somewhere. And they said, hey, why don't you come to Taiwan? And this was, I think, 1990, I want to say 97. And so she ended up in Taiwan. I was in Toronto, and it was her idea, basically. I wasn't really, I hadn't kind of figured out what I wanted to do with my life at that point. And she said, well, why don't you come to Taiwan and check it out? Maybe you can teach English here and see if you like the country. And that was it, basically. It was her idea, and that was 1999. And then I think 2 weeks later, I had bought an airplane ticket, and here I was.
Wow, she was pretty influential. Pretty, she
Very.
convinced you. That was your
Yeah.
first time going to Asia.
That was my first time. I guess I had been to America, as I mentioned. I had been to England on two other occasions, and then beyond Florida, Buffalo, England. That was my first time, yeah, being in Asia. Yeah.
I mean, like it's a cool idea to go and teach English in another country. I think that is appealing to a lot of, especially like English speakers, right? In North America, you have this kind of, oh yeah, a gift of, I just speak this language, and so I can go to a country and use that to get a visa. So it's tempting, but at the same time, it's a big move. I mean, to go to from Toronto to Taiwan, like what kind of gave you like the confidence to go and do that? Because a lot of people might want to, and then they don't end up doing it.
I think more despair. I had been living with my grandmother who passed away. Sadly passed away. I had lived with, like, my parents were divorced, and my grandmother provided a stable place for me to live while that was going on with my parents. And then she passed away, and I was kind of in an emotionally devastated state. Um, so it was kind of the loss of my grandmother. I was kind of in limbo, I guess you could say, and it came at the right time. So I would say under normal circumstances where you're just living a normal, happy, peaceful life, yeah, moving would probably be a challenge. But for me, I think it was the desire to escape the reality of losing my grandmother, and then not really knowing, where was I going to live, and what was I going to do with my life. I think moving to Taiwan provided a an adventure for me.
Sure, maybe a bit of a distraction as well from that
Yeah, a
grieving
distraction.
process.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds really hard. I'm sorry. That would be rough, and I could understand the motivation to want to kind of get away for a while. How long did you think that first trip was going to be?
Yeah, I think in my mind, I didn't think I was going to be gone for long. I mean, it ended up actually being about 10 or 11 months that I was away, but I was living with my sister, so it wasn't like, some of my friends that came here had no family or anything and just had to figure out. My sister was a good kind of stepping stone for me to figure out how to live here in Taiwan. But of course, living with her was also sometimes challenging. Siblings fight with each other.
Yeah, yeah.
So I guess we had enough of each other after about 10 or 11 months. And I just was homesick at that point. I was still in my early 20s and came home basically after about a year.
And so, like your sister, you said that she had done some other traveling, like around Asia, been to Korea and things like that. Did she arrive in Taiwan at the same time that you did, or was she already there?
No, no, she was there for about just under 2 years before I moved to
Okay,
Taiwan.
so she was there for like
Yeah.
3 years at that point. By the time you went back to Canada.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say she stayed in total, I think, for about 4 years and then eventually moved. And at that point, I took over, I guess, and started living here.
You kind of like did some leapfrog stuff in
Yeah.
Taiwan. So, like you said that you were homesick at that point, almost a year into it. What were you missing in Canada that doesn't exist in Taiwan?
I mean, mostly illusion, if you know what I mean. Like the idea of home, I think, you know, and I think for me, I don't live this way now, but I think when I was younger, and maybe this is a lot of young people, that sort of feeling of the grass is greener on the other side sort of attitude of I
Yeah.
stayed here for about a year and felt like, oh wait, there's something better in Canada. I need to go back. But then realizing quickly after being back, oh, I miss Taiwan. Now there's something better there. Maybe I need to try that again, and kind of just not not stable with where I was living basically.
Right. That idea of like FOMO, like fear of missing out. There's always
Yeah,
something more
maybe.
interesting
Yeah.
going on. Yeah. Yeah. I think
Yeah.
I can relate to that as well. Like I've always been internationally minded and wanting to travel to other places, but I frequently become disillusioned by the fantasy of what another country might offer. I tend to I idealize places, I think, or maybe even demonize them as well. Like in terms of my own country, I mean, growing up in Canada as well, I was never really a fan. I always thought like, yeah, the grass is always greener. Maybe it was the FOMO as well. It seemed like all the other places in the world were cooler. And maybe that's common because your home country gets a little boring after a while when you grow up there. But my first international experience was going to Australia, and I was there for 6 months. And I had this image in my head of like every cool place in Australia jammed into one. Like I'm going to be in the hustle and bustle of the city of Brisbane, and the beach is going to be the Great Barrier Reef, and like I'm going to be swimming with dolphins and whatever. I had all these kind of ideas. And when you get to a new country, you realize like yeah, this is really cool, but of course, it's life like anywhere else. There's pros and there are cons, and you have to make compromises and stuff like that. And so, as I've had more experience traveling, I think I kind of what's the word? Like, I hold back my expectations a little bit, where I'm like, I got to be realistic about these places as well. And now I think I see Canada in a fairer light, as well as it being a country that I enjoy living in. So I totally get what you mean about, like, kind of, yeah, looking for something fun just on the other side. It's got to be happening over there because it's not happening here, type of thing.
Right. And I think we just get bored as human beings sometimes, and we're looking for a change in our lives. But, it's quite an abrupt change going from one country to another. Like, you could just, like, take up a hobby.
You just start knitting or something.
Start knitting, I don't know, as opposed to actually moving to another place.
Sure. Yeah, especially like a place so far away, right? Like Toronto, Taiwan. I feel like there aren't probably a lot of similarities. Was there like a lot of culture shock when you first arrived?
Yeah, I mean, I think that first year it was a mixture of culture shock and excitement. So the culture shock wasn't so bad because it was so exciting. Um, Maybe closer to the end of that first year when I got homesick, maybe that's when the culture shock really started sinking in. But I guess if I could paint you a picture of, like, the day I arrived in Taiwan, it's pretty clear in my mind. I arrived in the Taoyuan airport, which is close to Taipei. And at this point in Taiwan, there weren't that many people speaking English. So my sister just said, "Okay, you need to go to the bus booth and just say Sogo. Sogo is a department store, maybe in other parts of the world as well, and tell them, you want to go to Taichung, that's where she was living, Sogo." And that the bus would just drop you in front of Sogo, and then hopefully there would be someone, my sister or her boyfriend, that would pick me up when we arrived in Sogo. So I find the bus terminal of the airport. I say this. Hopefully, I end up on the right bus, because nobody's speaking any English at this point. And I remember I step out, the doors of the airport open up, and there's this, like, vortex of hot, humid air that I've never felt in my life. Maybe if you go to, like, the zoo, they'll have, like, a tropical area that feels like, it was just like I was in a, it didn't feel real, like, just this heat that just consumes your whole body. I was like, whoa, I have never felt this on my skin before. And I feel that for a few seconds. I get on the bus, and then 2.5 hours later, it drops me off in front of Sogo. And it's funny that you mentioned Australia, that you stayed in Australia. There were these 3 or 4 Taiwanese Australian teenagers that were hanging out in front of Sogo when I got off. And then, by the way, it was August, so it was the hottest time of year as well. So I was dealing with the extra heat of the summer. And there's these 4 Australian Taiwanese dudes that are like, "Hey, mate," as I got off the bus, that live part of their life in Taiwan and part of their life in Australia. And we got to know each other. I never ended up actually seeing them again, but it was really nice having English speaking people when I got off. And then my sister's boyfriend, I don't know if he was confused or whatever, but it ended up taking me 3 hours, that should have only taken like 15 minutes, to end up at my sister's doorstep. He got lost, and then what it was is I got in a taxi because he came on his motorcycle and I had my suitcases. The taxi was unable to follow him because he was going too fast on his motorcycle, and we ended up going in circles. And anyway, I was lost for a while, and finally I talked to a Taiwanese person that spoke a little bit of English. I was able to make a phone call with their, before smartphones, when it was just like a flip phone, get a hold of my sister. Finally, 2 or 3 hours later, I'm in tears, I'm sweating, I'm scared, I'm frustrated, and there's my sister with open arms 3 hours later giving me a hug. And I was like, wow, that was getting lost your first day trying to get to your destination. So that was kind of my first day.
I mean, that's crazy. I mean, it sounds like a vulnerable situation as well, because like you said, this is before smartphones and Google Maps and all that stuff. It's always hard for me to wrap my head around that, like how people traveled before Google Maps, because I depend on it so much. Even in Canada, I depend on Google Maps. But like my dad and his brother, they did a Euro trip 40 years ago, and he was telling me these stories about them driving around all of these different European countries with a rental car and a paper map folded out on the dash, someone navigating. And I'm like, if that was what was involved with traveling today, I don't think I would do it, because that sounds anxiety inducing, just crazy.
But exciting at the same time, though, because you can't really get lost anymore. I mean, unless you're without a signal on your phone. That excitement of not knowing where you're going sounds scary, but at the time before the smartphone, it was just normal to get lost. Now, because we are so, including myself, we are so dependent on smartphones, it's scary when you get lost because it means something's not working on your phone.
Right.
That I think we've become just less adventurous, maybe. Like, there is something special about being one of the final generation of that time period that had that experience. And I'm grateful, by the way, for Google Maps.
Sure,
Like
yeah.
you said, sometimes I don't even know the area next to the area I'm living, and the Google map helps you. So it's like I'm grateful for it, of course.
I mean, maybe that's the difference, is that I've never been comfortable getting lost, because that's not necessarily like the era that I grew up in. Like when I started driving, so like I was like 14 to 16, I guess, when I was first learning to drive. I don't think Google Maps, I think it was out, but it wasn't like super popular at that time, I want to say, or at least I wasn't aware of it. And so I do remember some anxiety of like, I grew up in a small town, and we'd go to the city, and then I'd be like in a place that I was familiar with, but I didn't really know all of the neighborhoods, and trying to get from this place to that place. And I'd have like a written note from my parents that's like left on this road and right on that one. And but I was so happy when that was no longer my reality. Like when I could just like put it into my phone and be like, okay, that's just going to take me there. And if I miss my turn, it will correct and tell me where the next turn is. Like that was amazing. I loved that. And so maybe I didn't have enough experience getting lost to ever feel like, oh, this is an adventure. It was never an adventure for me. It was just anxiety.
It's funny when you mention about your parents writing, like I miss those kind of letters telling you how to get, but like, because it's like we don't need that anymore. So for me, I think because I grew up in that time period for maybe a longer period of time, there's something like tender and beautiful about that time period. Like everything is just so handed to us that, God forbid the grid shuts down one day. How are we gonna like survive? Like
No,
honestly,
we're screwed. We're at that point we'd be
we're
screwed completely.
toast.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, totally.
And I guess you had that note from your sister with the two words you needed to know, right? This was it, Sogo and well,
Sogo and Taichung Sogo. Yeah.
uh-huh. And that worked. That was all of the Mandarin you needed to get there.
Yes, but I wish she had given me written instructions from Sogo to her place, in the off chance that her boyfriend at the time, which was known for getting confused with time and directions. I wish I had had that written down as well, because that would have been helpful to me, which I didn't have.
You mentioned that when you got there, not a lot of people spoke English during that time. You said that was like
No.
1999, was it?
Yeah, 1999. Yeah.
So does that mean that it's different today? Do lots of people speak English in Taiwan?
Yeah, I would say, like, I live in the south. I'm in Kaohsiung. I think Lucas you spoke to, I don't know where he's living now. I think he's more in the north area. In the south, there's less people that speak English, but I would say more now than of course in 1999.
I guess we didn't finish that loop either. So you went to Taiwan for the first time for that year teaching English. Then you came back to Canada. I'm obviously somewhere along the line you went back. How did that happen? When did you end up going
Yeah,
back?
so you know what I remember? I remember, like, I felt special, my ego felt special. Like I just had this experience and none of my friends understand it, and I just lived somewhere insane for the last like 10, 11 months, that something so different from any of you, and I'm special, but they're just looking at me like, no, you're the same Cole that we know. Like Like, and they didn't care. They weren't really interested in, and I felt almost like I wouldn't call it reverse culture shock, but sort of a feeling of I feel special now inside myself, but nobody's looking at me like I'm special. And now I'm just literally living the same existence I did before I left with this new feeling and thought about this place in my head that really is irrelevant to everyone around me. And I felt like this longing to feel special again. And I think after that year, I kind of realized, oh, maybe I didn't need to move back. Maybe I should have stayed longer in Taiwan. And at that point, my sister was still there. That was sort of the end of her being there when I went back the second time, and that was a year later. Like I stayed in Toronto for about a year, just had odd jobs here and there, just different retail jobs or whatever. And then I was just like, you know what? I think I need to go back to Taiwan again. And then about a year later, which I guess puts us to about, I don't know, the end of 2000 maybe, I went back to Taiwan, and that was, I guess, my second round of Taiwan.
And is that when you ended up staying longer, or did you have some back and forth again after that?
No, I think I don't know if it was maybe from maybe this is common coming from a divorced family. Um, you kind of lose your sense of home, I think, when your parents get divorced, if you're young at the time that they get divorced, because then you no longer have. I mean, for some people, they might stay in their childhood home when that happens, but for me, I lived part of my life with my mom. I lived part of my life with my dad. So from the point of like when my parents got divorced, I felt displaced, and I think it created this dysfunction in me that was part of the grass is greener. Like I felt like I felt more at home not staying in the same place for a long period of time because I was disrupted from that childhood sort of safe space from the divorce. It made me move back and forth quite a few times, and quite dysfunctionally, if I'm to be honest. Like if I think about all the money that I spent, like moving from Taiwan to Toronto to Taiwan to Toronto, like I probably moved about, I don't know, I want to say four times, maybe five times, before I finally settled down here, like for an extended period of time.
And how long have you been there now?
So now, like my last move, and when my brain finally said, "Cole, no matter where you live, you're gonna feel this displaced feeling until you make peace with just staying where you are," which is now I've been in Taiwan, I guess around 2000, and I want to say my second son, who's now just turned 10 years old. So I guess about 10 years now.
So that's like 10 years straight on this last trip, but you've been there
Let's say
longer if you
11. Let's say
combine.
about yeah,
Okay.
11 years straight, but I guess what is it? 25, 26 years of having a relationship with Taiwan from 1999 till now. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. I mean, so like your relationship with Taiwan is like almost the same as your relationship with Canada in terms of overall duration.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of crazy actually when I think I have lived a better part of half my life, more than half my life, I guess. No, about half my life. I'm 48 now, so yeah, like in Taiwan. Um like Taiwan and Canada are pretty like even with how I feel about the two places now, I would say. But it took me many years of moving back and forth to realize that Taiwan was a good fit for me.
I mean, obviously, there's something special about it. If you were feeling this feeling of displacement or not feeling like you belong and you wanted to move and get some novelty, I mean, you could have gone to Calgary. Or, right? Like, that would have been easier, probably. So there must have been something about Taiwan that was like unique to keep you going for the 26 years, even if you were going back and forth. Like, what was the thing that drew you there or kept you there? Maybe is a better way of asking that.
I would say the thread that kept me there is my wife, whom I met my second near the end of my second round of being in Taiwan. Like when I went back and then I came back again the second time, I met my wife and we dated for a few months, and she was living I was living in Taichung. She was living in Kaohsiung, where we live now, because she's basically from Kaohsiung. And I met her on a random weekend. I went with a group of people, or sorry, I should say I went with one girl to visit her friends in Kaohsiung, and then I met my wife there, and I guess that was around 2000, and we started dating, I guess, from the point that we met, and then I was visiting her in Kaohsiung, and I would get on these 2 3 hour bus rides, because we now have a speed train here that you can get across the whole island in like 2 hours. This would be like a 3 hour bus ride. And actually, to paint you a picture of the bus, which I think is so special, when I first came to Taiwan, they had the old classic Nintendo games with a joystick on the back of all the seats of
Oh
these
wow,
buses.
that's
So
cool.
you could play Super Mario Brothers while you were, traveling for 2 or 3 hours, because this was also, again, before the smartphone, where you could occupy yourself with a smartphone. So they had the video games, and they would give you a tea box to drink, and it was just very comfortable to travel. I would travel for 3 hours, and then I think after about, it was really quick. I think nowadays this would be considered a quick romance, but after dating maybe for about 2 months, and I might be getting the time wrong, but around 2 months, her and I moved in together. Like, we were living together after about 2 months. And she moved, or I get confused now. I don't know. Did I move to her first? Yeah, she moved to me first in Taichung and lived with me for about, I don't know, just for a few months. And then I got bored, as Cole always got bored with where he lived. And I moved to Kaohsiung to live with her in Kaohsiung, and we got bored. And I moved her across the world to Toronto, and she lived with me in Toronto for a while.
Hmm.
And then we moved back to Taiwan. Like, you get, not only did the madness happen by myself, but then my partner, my girlfriend, who's now my wife, was now moving with me wherever I wanted to move. And I guess she was young and free, and so moving for her, I guess, was an adventure as well. So it was kind of exciting, I guess, for her as well, moving. And so she was part of that madness of the moving back and forth for several years, including after we had our first son. We moved from Taiwan back to Toronto, back to Taiwan. And then it wasn't until the second son that I became a much more stable, you've got two kids, Cole. You can't, and now they're going to be going to school. You can't keep moving back and forth. While your kids are young, before school, it's doable. But once they have school, I mean, either you're going to homeschool them, or they're going to be going to school. And if they're going to school, then you need to be grounded. So then uh, to be honest, just to add one further thing, during the whole COVID time, which I guess was around 2020, when all the madness in the world happened, that was my grounding time. To be honest with you, that was when I really fell in love with Taiwan during that time, because traveling wasn't considered safe. So I stopped I stopped going home for visits, and I had like a solid 3 or 4 years where Cole stopped getting on an airplane, and I just finally let that, I guess, emotional trauma of from the divorce and the moving constantly go, and I felt at home in Taiwan, like really at home for the first time. It was around 2020, and then it's just felt like I felt grounded basically since about 2020. But I moved back for the final time in around 2015. But when I really felt like I'm in the right place was around 2020, and I had just a solid almost 4 years of feeling like this is my home, and going through that sort of emotional roller coaster of I got to get out of here, to finally being like, no, this is a good place for me, and feeling like, okay, my life is in Taiwan now. I'll go home and visit, but this is where I live now.
You kind of needed like an outside force to like
Yeah.
just force you to stay in one spot.
Yeah.
Do you
A
think
crazy world event.
do you think like if you were in Toronto when that happened and you got stuck there for a couple of years, you would have ended up
Oh
staying there?
God, definitely not. Because to be honest, one of the moves I made in between all the moving I was telling you was to Vancouver, where you live. and I spent a year of my life in Vancouver. And that really, like, no disrespect to Toronto, but to me, when I think about Canada, Vancouver comes to my mind first, even though I didn't grow up in Vancouver. I think of the mountains and the ocean and just like that raw beauty that I think your home has. It's
Yeah.
a cleaner, cooler as in climate wise version of Taiwan because it's got the oceans and the mountains. So when I think of Canada, like Vancouver comes to mind.
I mean, Vancouver, I think, is special as well. I didn't grow up here. Like, I moved here. I grew up in Calgary or near Calgary. And so life was very different for me growing up than it is now. I've just been here a couple of years. And so I also see Vancouver with like kind of, fresh eyes or some novelty anyway.
Yeah.
So,
It just has so much to offer. So I think if during that time period, I guess you're talking like the lockdowns and all that kind of mumbo jumbo that everyone would like to forget about.
yeah.
um, I would have been out of Toronto. So as soon as I was able to get on any kind of transportation, there's no way I think I would ever. I could see myself living in Ontario, outside of Toronto. But Toronto, the city, it's a beautiful place to visit, and I would recommend anyone who hasn't been to Toronto. It's a really fun place to visit, but it doesn't hold that love that I have for Canada. Vancouver, for whatever reason, that 1 year was enough to make me feel like that's probably where I'd want to live if I were to ever move back to Canada.
Like, do you feel like now, I mean, obviously Canada is where you're from, but do you feel like Taiwan is more of your home than Canada is?
I want to say yes and no because I've always really struggled with language. So one of the hard parts for me is I do speak some Chinese, but it's almost embarrassing to say that it's not what it could or should be, my language abilities. And I would say I do rely a great deal on my wife with language, and so I think that's still to some point it's kind of I don't know, it's a weird feeling, like, it's a blessing and a curse at the same time. It's a blessing in the sense that who needs to understand and hear what everyone around you is saying all the time? Maybe that's beautiful to kinda live in your own little bubble where you don't really know what everyone's talking about. Maybe you can feel more at peace with life when you don't understand people, but then when you're trying to explain yourself and you can't communicate, then it becomes a curse because people don't understand you as well. So I guess I feel like although Taiwan feels solidly like my home, I do get homesick for Canada because of the language sometimes, I would say.
Sure. Yeah, I mean that's a big piece of it, right? That communication. If you don't have like solid communication, it can be an isolating feeling as well. Like
Yeah,
your
yeah.
analogy was like being in a bit of a bubble. I felt that way when I moved to Colombia. I was there for like 9 months over a couple of different trips. That's where my fiance is from, so it was a similar type of
Ah.
motivation for me. I had a partner from there, and all of her family, they don't really speak English. And Colombia in general is maybe more like Taiwan in the 1999, where no one really speaks English. Like I think the percentage of English speakers in Colombia is like 5%. So if
Wow,
you
okay.
want to do anything, you got to know Spanish. And when I got there, my Spanish was not great. And so little things like, okay, we have this apartment together, but like I want to go out and like buy some stuff at the grocery store. It felt intimidating to me to do that on my own. Like, oh, I don't want to go out and they're going to like ask me questions at the cashier and I won't understand how to pay. And like, I don't know like any of the social norms and stuff. And so I spent the first trip of like 4 months really felt like I was locked up in my apartment. Like I couldn't go anywhere without help. And it did feel isolating. It got better on the second trip for sure because my Spanish got a little bit better. And I mean, the more time you spend in a country, the more you kind of learn how to do the things that you need to do to live life. But yeah, I totally can relate with that. Language can either really connect you to people if you speak it well, or it can really disconnect you when you don't speak it well, right?
Yeah, well, it's like I can get by like you were saying, like my Chinese is at a level where I can order food and I can do the basic things that you would need to do. But I'm also a person, like I have my channel. I like to interview people. And part of why I started my YouTube channel of interviewing people was being able to speak my own language and have like intimate conversations with people, and kind of longing for that. But the ability of with my Chinese language skills is not, I can't have intimate deep conversations with locals here, and that makes you feel displaced sometimes, or it makes you, it takes away something,
Yeah.
so
Part of your
I
personality,
really,
maybe.
yeah, like I want the people here, like, and body language goes far, right? But only to a point, and I'm grateful, as we were talking about smartphones and technology, I'm so grateful for like translation apps, because that's allowed me now, without my wife around, to have kind of broken conversations using my translation app that I can now connect with people. But then what if the translation app occasionally says something that ends up being a rude translation that isn't correct, which happens, and they're looking at me like, what? And I'm like, oh, buhao isa, sorry, this is, I think it's not translating properly. So there's still a barrier even with the translation app. So yeah, the language is a hard one.
Yeah, and especially if you're an expressive person and you want to get to deeper conversations, that's harder to do artificially, or it's also just hard to reach that level in a foreign language. Period, right? And
100%.
I mean,
Yeah.
Chinese is notorious for being a difficult language to learn. Like, what are some of the challenges that you encounter when learning Chinese?
The tones, probably, we have this and it's like ma 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 ma, and the ma that I just said means like four different words depending on what tone you use. So, maybe I'm swearing at someone accidentally because I used the tone was off, instead of asking, like, I guess the tones are a big one for me. And I think, part of the problem is teaching English. You're in an English environment where they don't want you to practice Chinese, so you can't practice there. And then when I'm home, English has always been an easier way for my wife to communicate with me. So we're speaking English at home. My two boys use English with me most of the time and Chinese with my wife. So my only opportunity really to practice would be with Taiwanese friends who want to practice their English, or when you go to the market or somewhere where you're buying food, speaking to the locals that way. But it doesn't happen enough that it's a lot. Like, basically, I have to, if I want to get better, I have to literally force myself to go out of my way to speak. Otherwise, living here in English is actually a doable experience, which is unfortunate. You can become lazy, is what I'm saying, to learn the language.
And I think that that exists in every country too. Like, I think sometimes people assume, okay, if you want to learn a language, you need like an immersion experience. And yeah, that sounds like a great idea. So like, oh, I just need to go to another country. I'll have that immersion experience, and then just through osmosis, in a year, I'll be fluent in this language. And it's like, yeah, it is more complicated than that, isn't it? Like, in most places, in the world, a little bit of English goes a long way. And, we live in this kind of global community where you can find other foreigners who might be English speakers. You can surround yourself with a community of people from home, and you don't necessarily find yourself in an immersion experience even in a foreign country, right? I don't think that's an unusual experience at all to move somewhere and be like, you know what? I can kind of just get by with English. Like, this kind of works really well.
Yeah, I
And
mean,
so,
even
yeah,
in I was gonna say, even in Canada, right? You have Chinatown. A lot of people immigrate to Canada. Maybe they're from China, Hong Kong, Taiwan, and they can literally live within their own Asian community and not speak English well, but they can live in that environment very easily.
yeah.
So I'm just agreeing with you that it is easy to fall into that, and I think you have to force yourself out of your comfort zone if you want to improve in a language.
Yeah, exactly. Like, whether you learn it abroad or you learn it in the country, the process is not that different, actually. Like, it
Yeah.
does require a lot of like active act of work. And so yeah, and it's tough. Like the tones you said. I mean, I took one class of Mandarin in university, and the tones I thought were going to be more manageable. It's like, yeah, it's like pronunciation, like how it's like stress or something. How hard can it be? And then we got into the grammar of that, and like, okay, there's these four different tones, but then if you combine two third tones, then they have to become second tones or something. Like there's this kind of formula for how tones can change, where a word in isolation might be this one, but then in combination with another word, it becomes a different tone. And then I was like, how do people learn this? Like, this is insane. Like, this is so hard.
I mean, if I'm thinking about my friends, some of them are YouTubers, some of them are just expats that live here. They poured themselves into books and studying for hours and hours and hours and hours. And I've never really loved being a student. So I guess for me, like the idea of studying hours and hours didn't appeal to me. So I need to find a more organic way to learn as opposed to having a book. But I think having a proper book is quite useful.
Yeah, and I guess reading and writing is another challenge with Chinese because of the characters. There's no alphabet that you can learn. Do you think that you would need to learn the characters to learn how to speak Chinese?
No, I think for me, I think if you're starting out, I think it's useful. I think for myself, I would say conversation would be the best way for me.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it would be nice to be able to read stuff, but when I think about my own language experiences, I like learning languages. I'm fascinated by them, but I don't read or write in almost any language, like English included. I'm not a reader. I'm more social than I am academic. And so I would rather have a conversation with someone than read something. And so, I mean, I guess I like read things online in English, so I guess that counts. But when I think of like other foreign languages, the reading and writing is pretty low on my list of priorities. And then if you look at like the difficulty of Chinese, for me personally, the temptation to not learn the characters would be really, really high.
It's a very easy to not want to learn.
Yeah,
I agree. I agree with you. Regarding reading and writing, I was just going to say,
yeah,
with our smartphone technologies, and that's maybe the negatives of our technology. I think people do read and write less, and I've had to force myself. I started to become someone who journals and someone who reads novels, but I've had to like force that back into my life because the technology really has become easy to just sit there with your phone. But I encourage you, like it's really good for a part of your brain that I think you don't use as much when you're using technology. I think all people need to get back to reading and writing more, like just to keep your brain more coherent or whatever.
yeah, it's definitely one of those skills that is kind of like, especially writing, like with a pen and paper. It's one of those skills that like people don't really prioritize anymore. Handwriting and stuff like that. It's not really a thing. It's like, it might as well be like, reading maps or something like that at this point. It's like,
it's crazy. Like, yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Something else I wanted to ask you, because I mean, you've had this lived experience of going back and forth between Canada and Taiwan, Taiwan, Canada, Canada, Taiwan. I mean, what are some of the differences between those two countries? Like in terms of your day-to-day life, what are some things that stand out?
Oh, that's a very big question. I guess if I start with food would be a quick one that comes to mind. Of course, in Canada, we have a short few months of the year where we get our beautiful, harvested foods, fruits and vegetables, in the fall, summer seasons or spring. Like it's a short season, whereas in Taiwan, we have these fresh markets where you can buy fresh fruit and produce all year round because it's a sunny tropical country where they can grow food. So day-to-day life, I feel like I'm getting fresh food every day that I'm eating on my plate every day, which I think is so like beautiful and healthy versus like we get a lot of American imports or Mexican or wherever the food comes from in Canada. You can really taste the difference. Like if you buy a mango, for example, I'm sure when you were in South America, you had a fresh mango in South America, maybe?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Versus buying a mango from the supermarket, you can taste the difference. So it just the
Mm.
food is more that freshness of the food is a big one for me from day to day. Driving a scooter is another one. Like in Canada, I would be taking the bus, walking, or driving my own car. Here, I drive a scooter or I drive my car, so I'm on scooter a lot of the time. Driving with your kids on your scooter is just a very common thing here that grandparents in Canada will look at my parents will look at me and be like, "Is that safe?" And probably not by Canadian standards, but it's just
Mm.
how we do things here. So I guess driving a scooter would be a common thing. And I think going to work, let's say having a job in the morning, coming home at lunchtime, having a 2-hour lunch break at home and eating at home, and then going back to another job, as opposed to in Canada, I always remembered I would just be at work all day and eat lunch out or bring a lunch with me. Having, a lot of it, I guess a lot of my day to day that's different would be around food. I would say. And then the weather, of course, is a key one. Like, my family talks about it. Maybe you can agree that we've had heat waves in Canada in the last few years. But here every day is a heat wave, like like all year round, and then maybe you have like 2 or 3 months of the year where it's comfortable or manageable weather-wise. So the weather, the food, and then I guess once again the language of not necessarily remembering, conversations the way you would talk to a stranger in Canada, that probably doesn't really happen that much for me here because of the language barrier. So I guess those would be some key points: the language, the weather, and the food.
I mean, like a warmer tropical climate, fresh food that you can eat daily, and a longer lunch break. I mean, it sounds like a higher quality of life. Is it that simple, or are there some drawbacks? I mean, I know that the language is one of those drawbacks that you mentioned. Is there anything else that kind of would give Canada some points if we were making a comparison?
I mean, definitely there's nothing about Canada when it comes to food. I want to say weather. I mean, like for me, being Canadian, having Canadian skin, you can never really acclimatized to the heat here. So
Oh.
For me, Canada definitely wins. When I go home for a visit, I'm literally almost in tears at how much I'm enjoying the cooler temperature, like that my skin feels like it's where it's supposed to be and it doesn't feel like it's melting. So I would say the weather for me always wins in Canada. Just the fresh air when you live in a tropical humid place. The air, we do get some air pollution, but the combination of air pollution from time to time and the humidity combined, it's just quite like intoxicating, not in a good way sometimes. So yeah, I want to say the weather is a really key factor for me. And Canada is just like Taiwan is beautiful, but it's like when you've been away as long as I'm away for each time I go back to visit, it's just like I would say to any Canadian listening to this conversation, you're living in one of the most beautiful places in the world where we're so like if we're talking about Canada, we're so spoiled there. Like as far as like the space of our homes that we live in Canada, the amount of food you get on a plate when you order food at a restaurant is like insane to me now. It's like what you would consider just a portion of food is like for 2 or 3 people in Taiwan. Like we just everything is just literally bigger. There is some luxury to that, although I would say it's healthier food wise, of course, eating smaller portions, but there's luxury. We're just overly spoiled as far as I guess when it comes to like the imports that we get. There's just so much variety. It's not necessarily fresh, as I was saying, but the variety in Canada, the space. Taiwan is this and Canada is this. So the sheer size of it, you could just drive out to like a country town, the countryside of Canada, and you look around and you're just like, like you could literally look in you could go somewhere where there's nobody around you, like where you're just in this beautiful country utopia. So I think the beauty, yeah, of course, the beauty is the part that I love. Aside from wanting to see my family, obviously, that I miss because they're so far away. The beauty of Canada, like, don't, like, as a Canadian, don't ever take that for granted. It's so beautiful in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
It's just such a beautiful place.
And I think it's one of those things too. I mean, it's a cliche, but like you don't notice those things until you leave the country as well, right? And I'm sure that's true for everyone who has lived abroad. It doesn't mean that it's not worth it to live abroad, but you do gain a different kind of appreciation for your home country when you spend some time away from it. Like even comparing, smaller changes between British Columbia and Alberta, where I grew up. Like you were talking about big expanses where you can't see anybody. I mean, that's where I grew up. There was no one where I grew up. Nobody. 5,000 people in this small town and just farmland everywhere. And you live in there, like in that environment for a few years, and you get tired of it, and you want to go to the city, or at least I did. And yeah, the hustle and bustle, the energy of the city, and everything is so convenient, and you can just take the bus and go to the store. Everything is right there at your fingertips. I love that. But when I go back to visit my parents, it's like, oh my gosh, it's quiet. Like, it's so calm here and relaxing, and the sky is huge over the prairies. This endless expanse of blue sky, and it's sunny all the time. Even in the winter, the sun is out. And so yeah, you appreciate those little things, and sometimes you need some perspective to be like, yeah, you know what? The place that I might have not liked growing up still has some things that are positive about it,
Oh no, I mean, oh Canada, It's just
Yeah.
thinking of the song "Oh Canada." It's just there's this song. I don't know, is it Joni Mitchell? She says, "I could drink a case of you." Like if I were to compare Canada to a case of beer or to a bottle of wine, like I would just consume that bottle of wine. It would be it's just like I feel emotional. It's just so. Yeah, for me, yeah, and I'm sure people that live here that are from Europe, or like, there's just nothing comparable. Yeah, I think the home from which you come from, there's always going to be this tender, beautiful part of it that can't be replaced.
Mm-hmm.
I would say, and actually, one more thing I was going to say was,
Yeah.
when you have a time of year in Canada in the summer where you have sunlight till like 10 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
We don't ever have that in Taiwan. Like five, I want to say 5, 6, 6:30 at the latest. It's dark all year round. We do not have that extended daylight that you have till like 10 p.m. So there's something beautiful about that extra daylight that you do get for part of the year that we don't get here. So that would be another thing that I miss, I guess, about Canada.
Yeah, we definitely have extremes in that way, especially in northern Canada, right, where it could be like, almost the constant light or constant darkness depending on the time of year. Yeah, that's definitely unique to where we're placed, I guess, in relation to the equator or the Arctic Circle or whatever it is. I mean, you have a unique experience and a unique relationship between Taiwan and Canada. What kind of relationship does your family have with Canada? You have 2 kids, right? Your wife has spent some time in Canada. How do they see Canada?
So if I start with my wife, she lived with me for, I guess, about, I want to say, let's see, 3, 4, 5 years, not consecutively, but around 5 years of her life, she lived in Canada. And she I mean, the last time she didn't really wanna, actually, 2 of the times we moved back to Taiwan, she didn't really wanna leave Canada. She loves Canada. I mean, I think all the things that I mentioned, the wide open spaces and the diversity and the multiculturalism and all that stuff. So I would say she has a great love for Canada, and she could probably see us at some point living in Canada again. And then as far as my 2 kids, my older son, who's 14 going on 15, his first year of school, he lived in Canada for junior kindergarten, and so he had kind of a taste of Canada, and I think he really loves Canada. I would say I could see him really desiring living in Canada at some point. maybe he'll go to university in Canada. And then my younger son has never lived in Canada, but we've gone back to visit several times, and just came back from a trip in 2024, and he loved it. And I think for them it's it's the things, like there's just more of what you like. If you're into Dungeons and Dragons or Warhammer minifigures, there's stores everywhere. It's more like the consumerism of it. Like for him, it's like, oh, there's all these stores, Walmart. We don't have Walmart here. It's like, oh, I can buy. Like it's consumer heaven in Canada.
Yeah, it is.
Uh, Taiwan doesn't have quite the we can order things online, but so I think for him it's the shops and places he can go. So I would say all three of them have a strong love for Canada. I could see us all living there at some point, but I think while they're in school, life is definitely more comfortable. I think financially, I guess I don't know if I mentioned, there's just no comparison. Taiwan is just a much more financially stable place to live. And I think that's why a lot of Canadians do choose to leave Canada to live in other places. Um, without getting into the economy or politics or whatever, Canada is definitely, I think, struggling economically. It's just a harder place to make a comfortable living, I think. And I think that is what entices Canadians to live abroad. And I think that's one of the things that keeps me at this point in time living abroad, that one day I believe in myself that I will be at a financial point where I can live part of my life in Canada. But I think the economy plays a big factor for me for why I choose to be here versus living there.
And like sometimes the perfect place to live isn't a single place at all. It's like two places or maybe even more. You could spend part of the year in one place and then part of the year in another. And then you kind of get like the benefits of both. You can kind of hack the system. So I think, especially with the Canadian passport, we're very lucky. A lot of Canadians can do that all over the world. And so that's pretty cool. In terms of like the home culture that you guys have in Taiwan, what does that mix look like? I mean, is it mostly Canadian culture, Taiwanese culture? Does it feel like a fusion of the two?
Like that, my actual house that I live in?
Yeah, like between like you and your kids and your wife, like that environment.
I would say I've kind of made, and you can see back here, it doesn't really look particularly Asian. It's kind of looks like a cottage, right, with the lamp and we kind of make, I would say our house, it's got a lot of IKEA furniture. I would say it's very cottagey. I actually have two out of the picture here. I have two Muskoka chairs, which you can't get more Canadian than the wooden, the large wooden Muskoka chairs. I would say our house looks more Western than Asian, I would say.
And in terms of like cultural norms and practices, food, is it also more Canadian in that regard?
I would say for my kids, they're very American or North American. They like their sandwiches and pizza and like the typical stuff that kids and teenagers like to eat. I would say my wife and I probably eat more Eastern. Like I would say I eat a lot more rice and tofu, and like more, I would say I eat more Taiwanese cuisine personally. I think it's just for me it's just lighter than to sandwiches and pasta and stuff like that. I would say I am maybe more Taiwanese than my other three family members. I really like Chinese or Taiwanese food, I would say.
Do you notice when you go back to Canada that like reverse culture shock? Do you feel like you've become Taiwanese after so many years, at least partially?
Yes, I would say like one thing, like not Canada is of course a very safe place, although in recent years it's maybe less considered less safe statistically than it once was, but it's still a relatively safe place. But I think in Taiwan is next level safe. Like you could almost like if you left your phone on a table in a random place, of course someone might steal it, but there's a good chance 3 hours later you go back and it's still in that space. But like it's a very comfortable, safe place to live. So I guess I have to be mindful. Like You can't leave your phone sitting there for 3 hours in Canada. Like most countries, it's probably going to
Uh-huh.
be stolen.
Uh-huh.
Um, just getting used to life is more real in Canada, maybe like just like more mindful of your possessions. The language, once again, being more mindful not to say something to piss someone off, because as someone who doesn't really have to engage in any major conversation there, I find myself wanting to talk more when I'm in Canada, and just being mindful of, we have a very, I don't know, how would I say, we have a very mindful country when it comes to how you say things, not sounding rude or whatever. Like I'm not down with the lingo of Canada now is like very, you have to be very careful how you speak about different types of people and what. Like I'm not used to living in an environment where everyone's very ultra sensitive about how you speak about things versus here it's still kind of old school. Like people don't get offended as easily. I think Canadians are very, I think we're sensitive people, and I think we have to be mindful of how you say things to people. So just the sensitivity, maybe.
And I guess like every culture or every country kind of has like their social rules, like the things that you do and the things that you don't do and the obligations that come with that. And I guess if you're not in that environment for a long time, it might just feel foreign as well, where it's like, what's expected of me in a conversation?
There's that, and the definitely reverse culture shock. Like just as far as I've lived here so long now that, yeah, I guess it does feel more like home on an emotional level here, that I feel a little bit displaced. Like I know I'm Canadian, but I don't feel like, a lot of Canadians, they have that pride, Canada, like tattoos of the Maple Leafs on their bodies, maybe. And I
Yeah.
love Canada. I'm not putting those people down, but maybe I don't have that strong pride. I have a strong love for Canada, but I don't have that sort of country pride, maybe that I maybe once had when I lived there. Now I'm just like, no, that's one of my homes, and Taiwan is one of my homes, and almost like I feel like an alien in both places, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, yeah. That I hear that from a lot of people who have spent a lot of time abroad. Sometimes it's people that were raised in a country that their parents aren't from, and then you kind of have that. You can have like that third culture kid idea where their parents have one culture, they grew up in another culture, and they don't really feel like they can identify with either one. And I think you can get that way as an adult as well if you spend enough time in a different country where you're like, I haven't fully integrated into the country that I live in, but at the same time, I can't necessarily relate to the people from back home like I once did. And then you can also find yourself in that third culture space, I think.
Yeah, it's like that, definitely. And I think if you were to ask my older son, he feels that way as well, even though he's mostly been raised here. If I ask him, well, what are you? Are you Taiwanese? Are you Canadian? Are you a white guy? Are you an Asian guy? He sees himself, it's interesting. He sees himself more as a white guy, even though he's half Taiwanese and half me, half what I am. Um, but then when it comes to the language and everything, he's very Taiwanese. So it's kind of an interesting, he's kind of an interesting mix that way. And my younger son, I don't think he really at this point distinguishes between being a Canadian boy or a Taiwanese boy. But yeah, I would definitely agree with you that I have that as a grown up. I feel that way for sure.
Yeah, it's very interesting how our perceptions of the world can change even as adults, and they can change in very profound ways. I mean, my biggest international trip to Colombia. I was only there 9 months, not 26 years, but I came back a different person. I really did. And travel broadens the mind. It's so true. And the longer you spend abroad, the more things that you notice about yourself, about your home country, about the place that you're traveling in, about people in general. It's crazy. And that's why this podcast for me is so much fun. And this conversation has been amazing. Thank you for having this with me, Cole. I appreciate it.
It's been lovely, man. Yeah, I hope you continue doing this. You asked some great questions, and I can tell that you're genuinely like curious about what it's like living in different places. So I encourage you and hope you continue on this path. I think you're a great interviewer.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. That's very kind of you. No, I have no plans on stopping. I'm going to keep going. Keep doing this. I really enjoy it. And yeah, before we wrap up, let people know how they can find your content online, because you also do a bunch of interviews and different content there in Taiwan, right?
Yeah, so my YouTube channel is my name, which I guess they'll see in the title of who you're talking to, is Cole Fogle. And yeah, basically my channel is just I interview expats that live here or people visiting here. And I occasionally go out and do like vlog style videos. I haven't done enough of those recently. I should do more of those, but it's been more interviewing than anything else because I really like having these intimate conversations. So if you want to find me, Cole Fogle is my YouTube channel. It's my fan page on my Facebook. It's also my Instagram. It's all the same name. So easy to find.
Awesome. Yeah, and I'll put links in the description below as well, and so people can find it that way. Amazing. Thank you so much, Cole. And talk to you later. Appreciate this.